Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the daily medicine transmission for September 9th, 2021, 9/9. Oh, I love the number synchronicities. An auspicious day, I suppose. We're going to talk about a couple different things. So welcome back. If you are part of this community and you are here on a regular basis, or even if you're just popping in here and there when you can. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. And thanks for being here. I really, truly appreciate each and every one of you. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today. We are going to, I'm going to share a little bit about my astrology so you kind of understand the intensity that I have been exhibiting, because there is, in fact, something that can be referenced in terms of that right now. And I want to share that with you so you can kind of understand where it's coming from. We're going to talk about stellar physics, right? And that's the physics of stars. We're going to talk about stellar physics. We're going to talk about electromagnetism. I'm going to share some things with you that are easily accessible to you in terms of being able to track things and look them up. And I'm going to show you some things, make some connections about what has been happening. Of course, we'll share the intuitive reading that has some interesting callbacks from yesterday, and go over the astrology. Today's astrology is really important. I mean, it is all the time, because it's a constant opportunity to align with the sacred geometry of the universe, but it also is making connections to where the next new moon is. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because we're still in the lunar cycle that has to do with the very recent Virgo new moon. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but there are connections that the moon is making today that are connected to that Libra new moon that's happening in October, which is going to be fairly, very powerful. It's going to, of course, be in Libra, the new moon. It's on the same day. Pluto is going to station direct, and from there, we're going to have all of these outer planets starting to station direct, Saturn and then Jupiter. And of course, as we move through the end of 2021 into early 2022, we're going to have Neptune station direct, Chiron station direct, eventually Uranus stationing direct. Mercury's going to station retrograde in its time in Libra. So Mercury is in Libra today, and has been and will continue to be so, but it's going to station retrograde in Libra. So we're going to have Mercury retrograde in another air sign here very soon. Now, one thing I will mention before we get into the specifics, and this is actually a kind of good segue into my own personal astrology, is that tomorrow Venus is going to move into Scorpio. And we've been talking about this for a couple days. Venus is at her detriment in Scorpio. It's her least powerful position. And the moon is going to also be moving into Scorpio very early tomorrow morning, late tonight on the west coast of the US. So there is... when we plug into the earth herself as the living soil, as an actual figure of the divine mother in some ways, in all ways, really, we find that she steps up when it's time to shield us, to give us support, to give us guidance. And this is really where we get our most power from, really. Of course, from divine source, absolutely. But right now, being able to connect directly to the planet herself has been something I've been talking about for a long time, and I think is really helping to mitigate some of this really intense pressure, right? And density. There's a lot of density that is impacting us, and it's being experienced in a lot of different ways. And I still stand wholeheartedly behind where my position was yesterday. And so let's move into that. First of all, I want to explain to you that I have a stack up right now in my 8th house, right? The 8th house of the underworld, of the shadow, of the subconscious, of the power dynamics that result from our relationships with each other, from the darkness, right? And it's the part of ourselves that we inevitably have to face. There's no way around it when we want to alchemically transmute and we want to synthesize and create something new. We have to accept these poles of ourselves. And when we consistently try to bypass that or to look away from that because we feel like that if we focus on the negative by actually acknowledging that there is ugly as well as beauty, and they're pretty much the same thing, just like that Gemini archetype, then it's a real disservice to us in our own process. And it's important that we take the time and to really go into these spaces. So even as of today, the sun now has moved into my 8th house. And I'm talking about from a Western astrology, zodiacal astrology, where the zodiacal or astrological calendar is sectioned into equal 30-degree spaces and is functioning in a much more geometric type of way, as opposed to sidereal or Vedic astrology, which is tracking the placements of the planets and the fixed stars based on the constellation. So it's a different system, and they all have their place and they all have their meaning. And the more you learn about it, the more that you can utilize these different systems for their intended purpose. I personally use Western astrology because it is more about the geometry. It is more about, and specifically a house system, the Placidus house system, and don't get too caught up on all of this stuff. It's basically the house cusps are important when I do the starseed marking. So this is what I read, but that doesn't mean that whole sign astrology is invalid. In fact, it makes it a little bit easier to utilize the archetypal symbolism of each house when it's more of a whole sign astrology rather than a Placidus system or any other house system that has an actual degree on your cusps. Anyway, the sun is now moved into my 8th house. I have Mercury in my 8th house. I now have the moon is in my 8th house. Mercury's in my 8th house. The moon's in my 8th house. Venus is now moved into my 9th house, which is where it's at in my natal chart. Mars is in my 8th house, conjunct my north node, right? And so the intensity and the fire is very much on the surface and is really driving me right now. So I just want to give some context for where I'm at personally. And when I talk about how focusing on the negative in your conscious awareness versus where is your resonance at the seat of your creation? Where is the resonance in your vibration in your body? What is that toroidal field quality? One thing I want to express here is that, yes, right now it's very intense for me. Like I am steeped in these places that have to do with the shadow, have to do with the darkness, have to do with the places that people want to turn away from. And I refuse to turn away from them. In fact, it's being illuminated now that the sun has moved into my 8th house. One thing I want to share with you is that despite the consistent conscious attention and awareness and acknowledgement of this aspect that we have been sliding into, quite honestly, since, January of 2020 was that Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Remember, Pluto is the agent of the realm of Scorpio and is the lord of the underworld, the realm of our transformation that comes from an inevitable cycle of death and rebirth. There's no rebirth without the death, right? There's no metamorphosis without some sort of destruction. And we talked about this a lot, actually, when we talked about the chrysalis and the metamorphosis of the caterpillar to the butterfly. The caterpillar has to be rendered into a goo before it is transfigured, right? And the same goes for any process. Something has to be released. Something has to be let go of. And this is the realm that we really struggle with. And if you can come out of the 8th house intact and not running away screaming from yourself, the alchemical transmutation and the power of our synthesis is incredible. This is where magic happens, right? Like actual magical creation. And it's a tool, right? How you use it is a tool. And it's a tool and it depends on how you use it. And intention's one thing, how you actually proceed is quite another. So even though for me personally, I have been acknowledging, giving, shining light on, giving, being aware of, calling out this slide into these times that we're in now that people didn't even believe would actually be a possibility are now like right upon us, of course, right? It's unavoidable. Just because I was focusing in being aware of that, right? Calling it for what it is, not being fearful, just calling it for what it was and being aware and acknowledging it, that has not negatively impacted my life at all. In fact, my life, my personal life has, since September of 2019, since my walk-in experience, since I started Catalyst, and up until this point, has gotten, exponentially better. Like, I'm in a position that I would have never ever dreamed I could be in based on what I had experienced previous to this situation. I work less hard, I work for myself. I'm completely in love with what I do, and I'm in a better position than I could have ever imagined. And so, but that didn't stop me from acknowledging what was in the darkness, what was unseen, what was hidden from us, and what is the result of the power dynamics, or the power dynamics that are the result of our collective communion, our shared resources. That has a lot to do with that eighth house. And so this is not because my conscious thoughts were in one direction or another. They're merely an expression of what's going on under the surface. But my life has transpired because of my resonance and trusting my gut, following my intuition, being aware of what is going on in the full picture, and making decisions to trust my gut and my intuition. And it has led me to a place where I can do this work in a way that is I wouldn't say comfortable, but it is. I'm incredibly comfortable. I mean, I don't have, access to, all of these resources. I'm not like wealthy or anything. And there's been challenges. There's been a lot of challenges, right? Like, I've lost family members this year to COVID, right? My dad is going through a healing process. He was diagnosed with cancer this year and is really struggling, and had been really struggling to like get over that. He's not healed necessarily, but his cancer is quote unquote cured. Having to face the grieving process of certain family members getting the V, right? Like, there's a lot of things that are very real and very potent and bring out the dark side of this entire process. But being aware of them, acknowledging them, and not turning away from them and giving voice to them has not created fear in my life. And it certainly hasn't, led me to experience trauma. And so I just want to speak to that, because there's so much, it keeps coming back around to this trap of like, if you just, of course we have a choice where we focus our attention. Absolutely. And I'm not going to sit here and say that we shouldn't focus on our blessings. We shouldn't focus on what we're grateful for. We absolutely, but it's coming from a resonance of so much deeper than your conscious mind. And to honestly believe, because you're a light worker and a starseed, that you're not going to experience challenge, and you're not going to experience even things that are going to put you face to face with your own shadow of fear just because you're a light worker, I think is a real disservice to the entire process of learning how to alchemically transmute the shadow into your own power. So eighth house is big right now. It's where my North Node is. My natal Pluto is in my eighth house. Okay, so things are moving across that constantly. So yeah, I'm not going to shy away or turn away from this incredibly deep and potent and raw aspect of life, just so I can pretend that that's going, if I turn away from it and don't look at it, it doesn't exist. That is, And if you believe that, and that's what gets you through the day, and that's what allows you to feel like yourself, and that's what your gut's telling you to do, follow it. absolutely follow it. This is all about our innate. Our innate knows, and this is the best thing that we can do. I'm here to teach you the language of astrology and symbolic language so that you can interpret your own messages, your own information that's coming through, right? It's just like taking, a class in a language and somebody is your teacher and they're, guiding you through the process. This is kind of the way that you can learn this language. And just like any language, right? Astrology, anything else, you immerse yourself in it. Scientific language, you immerse yourself in it and just have some patience, right? And patience is definitely a big part of this right now. So if you are feeling fearful, because there is a lot of drumming up this energy, there's a lot of density coming in right now. And I'm going to show you the actual physics of this as well and give you some reference here to how we can actually tap into the larger context of this so that we can move through it gracefully and not get stuck, right? It's about getting stuck in this place and not necessarily like turning away and believing that if we turn away, it doesn't exist, right? That's something that object permanence is something that develops very young age, right? Very, very young. So we're way beyond that developmental stage where if something isn't right in front of us, we are just like, oh, it's not there, right? That's like infant toddler level where we develop object permanence. Okay, so, all right, I'm going to show you some things here. So we're going to move over to share the screen. I'm also going to, there we go. I'm going to move over and share the screen here. I'm going to also minimize myself so we can, and here's our chart for today. We'll get into this, I swear. And I will do my best to keep this as truncated as possible. All right, so what are we looking at? Well, we are looking at the current Schumann. Now, if you've been tracking this, you know that it's been pretty mellow for a while, right? For kind of like days, honestly, right? So you can see it here between 3 and 12.6 hertz, right? It's just been, it's barely been blipping. And then, yesterday it went, pew, and then here it is last night. Now, right here, you want to measure, this is the hours in UTC time, right? This is about 4 hours ahead of East Coast Standard Time here in the United States, right? So right here. So you see it jumped right up to 50 hertz, right? It had been pretty mellow for a while, and then it started jumping. Now, something to keep in mind is that the magnetic field has been overall weakening. And if you are a fan or a listener of Suspicious Observers on YouTube, this is where I'm getting a lot of this information. And, what's interesting about that is that when I listen to their report for today, there's been a lot of like, the solar weather. Yes, there were 2 eruptions. There's solar wind coming, and I'm going to show you the actual movement of the solar wind and the density on the next screen. But these solar winds and these CMEs have been having more impact than they should because their magnetic field is weakening. And so it's not boosting itself in its frequency and oscillation in order to buffer against what normally it would. And so we're getting bombarded more often with more solar weather, right? Solar winds, the plasma, the coronal hole stream. We're getting bombarded with more solar weather in general, okay? And that's having an impact on us. It absolutely is. And solar cycle 25 is just starting. So, get used to it. So every time that there's a big flare or there's solar wind and there is disruption in radio waves and things like that, it's important not to get caught up again in those things because they are just going to keep coming and getting stronger and just keep coming and getting stronger. So, but I want to show you this because this is a perfect example here of how eventually the Earth stepped in and gave us a buffer. And I'm going to show you in the astrology today how this is also being symbolically represented, that we need to give ourselves a break. So the other part of the intensity of all of this is the fact that, yeah, there was solar weather being released towards us. There were flares on the sun that exploded, and now that we're getting the incoming solar wind. And so that certainly is going to have an impact on us. More solar radiation means more information, right? More information means, we have more information to process. And it can really be aggravating. It can be irritating. It can keep you from sleeping. The dream state has been very active. People have, and you can see it all over, right? It is the kind of the oscillation is getting faster. People are experiencing it in all kinds of different ways, where they are either feeling the doom and gloom, right? Or they're feeling euphoric, or they're feeling something, right? Everybody is feeling something. That is for sure, that something has come in, and from our sun, and from where we are in the galaxy as well, something coming in. And for the first part of it, there wasn't much of a buffer, right? We were just getting the full impact. And then sometime this morning and last night, right, you can see it right here. This is at 5 a.m. UTC, so that would be like 1 a.m. East Coast time. The Schumann spiked up to about 50 hertz, right, and then came down a little bit and then kept doing a little blip, right? And so that means the oscillation, or the frequency of the electromagnetic field, was higher, right? So that's more wavelengths per second, right? And higher frequency means more energy. It also means more of a pushback. Now, I'm going to show you here. So this is right about, where are we? 10. So, yeah, we're right about here. So it came back down again, right? It came back down to roughly about 20, let's see, it looks like about 22, 23 hertz, right? So it's not back down to its baseline, but it's not also like, super, super fast. Now, you can find this for yourself, right? This is at the Space Weather Prediction Center, and you can go in their geospace magnetosphere movies, and this shows you the velocity of the solar winds, the density. Now, this is the Earth right here, okay? I want to make sure that you guys are all seeing this. Yes, this is the Earth right here from different, from different vantage points. And then the pressure, right? And I want you to keep in mind about density and pressure, because we're going to talk about this and relate it to how we as individuals, as with our own toroidal field, right? With our own field that's emanating off of us, how we can think about it in this way of pressure versus density, and how a star uses its pressure in order to push back and keep itself in equilibrium based on the incredible density and the gravity that would otherwise it would collapse in on itself, okay? And this is how a star ends up dying. So I'll get to that in a second. I want to show you this though. So this is the density of the field around us, okay? So you can see here that it becomes more dense as it gets darker in color. So I want to show you, and keep an eye on the time. So here's the time right here, 10 UTC, which would be about what, 6 a.m., 6:20 a.m. East Coast time. All right, and now let's go back real quick. I want to show you 10 UTC. So it's right about here, still in that space of like between 30 and about 40 hertz right here. This is where it peaked, about 5 UTC. And we're not going to be able to see that necessarily on this, but I want to show you what's going on here. So you can see it. Here's the solar weather bombarding us right now. You can see it coming in, and nothing, right? It's pretty stable in terms of the density around us, even though we are getting bombarded with dense solar wind, right? And what is density? Woo! Now you see that. Did you see that? That was about 1300 UTC. Here comes another one, right? Here comes another one. So it's going to go back and do it again. Watch. Still it's pretty good. Now watch. It's moving, but it's like, now it's starting to, yep, you can see the ripple. Something, there it is. Wow. It just expanded, right? It just expanded out. So let's look down here at the pressure. Same thing. So this is, the more towards the red part of it, more pressure, right? And you can see the pressure around this side of the planet. Well, did you see that? Hold on, go back. I want you to watch something. Watch here, watch. You're gonna see it come in from the right. Did you see that? Now think this is the direction that the solar wind is coming towards the planet from over here, right? Something came in from behind us. That was incredible. But you can see again that the pressure is not it's not making as much of an impact, right? So here we go. It's moving, it's moving. It's pretty mellow. Oh, you saw that. And then it all kind of starts to, yep, look at that. Oh, wow, that was really cool, right? It just kind of like spread back out, okay? So, and that's the velocity. That's the speed of the, that's the speed of the solar wind, and that's the speed of our magnetosphere, right, in terms of its oscillation as well. So that's just, and here we are right here. It's starting to mellow back out. And it was right about this time, actually, that we saw that big, fluctuation as the field of the planet starts to minimize, again, in terms of its oscillation. But there was something very distinct that came up and put a big buffer. And so even though we were being bombarded with all of this solar weather, we were in a moment of stasis or a moment of equilibrium, right? And as I've talked about before, the wheel turns, but we want to be the hub of the wheel, right? We want to be the calm in the storm, the stillness in the storm. And as the pressure or the density, it keeps pushing in, which many of us have been feeling and acknowledging, right? It's important to acknowledge this instead of pretending it doesn't exist, or pretending that if you acknowledge it, you're going to call in all of this negativity into your life. There was a mitigation, right? Finally, the earth stepped in and provided this buffer just long enough for us to be like, okay, enough already. And it's important to keep this in mind, just in general, right? Because just like any good parent, right, or good mother, you don't want to smother your children. You don't want to keep them from having experiences. We need to be able to have the influx of this solar energy in order for us to feel what it's like and to be upgraded from it, whatever that means to you, right? We get more information every time we are bombarded with solar weather, and it does have an impact on us. But eventually, we need to find, there needs to be an equal but opposite force to buffer some of that, so we don't burn out our circuitry, right? And yesterday was that purification by fire from the solar weather coming in and burning things out from us, but we don't want to burn ourselves out completely, right? But we also don't want to completely... we don't want to take something, there it is. We don't want to take something that's going to suppress the symptoms because they're uncomfortable, because what you're doing is suppressing your body's natural tendency and immunity to take care of what is toxic within you. So as we get this solar weather that comes in, it is moving through our system just like the purification of fire, right? And it forced a lot of this stuff up to the surface, whatever it was. And we are still in Hyades starseed territory when it comes to the moon's nodal axis, my friends. So letting things move through us rather than cutting them off or pretending they're not there, not acknowledging them. It's like taking aspirin when you have a fever. Yeah, it makes you feel better, but you're actually suppressing your body's natural immunity. And so, but eventually the mother stepped in, right? She stepped in and she allowed, her heartbeat started to race, and she provided this, this buffer for us. Okay. Now, when it comes to stellar physics, and this is going to be the last piece that's about, science, and how this is inseparable from us. This is all energy and frequency, all of it. when it comes to stellar physics, the way that a star keeps itself from collapsing in on itself, right? Because what is density? Density is a function of volume and mass, right? The more mass you have in a certain amount of volume, the more dense that mass is. And so a star has this incredible density at their core because of all of the mass that's accumulating at the core, right? And it has all of these hydrogen atoms that are moving at such a rate to be able to fuse together and create helium and release energy, right? And it's in the process of all of that particle movement that it provides the pressure outward to create an equilibrium. So much like us doing that transmutational work within us energetically to provide the pressure that then keeps a balance with the density that otherwise we would collapse under, right? And you can relate this to the energetics of, 3D, 4D, 5D, if you want, in that as the density, the density that is nothing more than a function of matter versus volume starts to press in, we have to create enough pressure from within in order to keep that equilibrium. We don't want to push it out entirely, because if we don't have the density and we don't have the mass at the center, then there is no star, right? There is no nuclear furnace. And so it's a matter of balance and equilibrium always. So again, when you deny the density, you're at, you cease to exist in some ways. And if that's what you want, then that's something that you have to figure out for yourself. We are here on Earth with our feet on the ground here, moving towards a reality where we exist in a fifth dimensional state in a third dimensional existence, right? That is what this really means. And when we forego that 3D entirely, right? When we say that we aren't even going to be in it, then yeah, you're moving out of physicality, but there's no star without the density, right? There is no gravity. There's no creation of this energy without the 3D density. It's our job to provide the pressure through the process of our alchemical transmutation to keep an equilibrium, a balance. And that comes from our own toroidal field. And so this is what as above, so below, right? You can't necessarily bypass what is below. And we are in Virgo season, my friends. This is exactly what happens in Virgo season. Everything below is what the root system is utilizing to grow, not the sunlight. That was in Leo. That was Leo season, the sun providing the energy for photosynthesis. And that's still happening. Like, that hasn't gone away. But the function of the individual plant during Virgo time is that it is drawing its resources from underneath, from the living soil. And this is just such a beautiful way to really make sense of everything that's happening energetically right now. So we don't want to bypass what is under the surface. We want to use it in order to alchemically transmute and create the pressure that provides the equilibrium with the density of the mass in a certain volume, right? Because there's only so much space that we take up, right? And so, but without that density, without that mass, there is no star, right? And Leo is us as the sun, and Aquarius is each sun creating a galaxy, right? It's just a collection of stars in a galaxy and a universe. So, all right, there's the science lesson, if you even want to call it that, and we will go right into our reading for today. Number one. Let's see, where did I go? I know I'm here. I'm here somewhere. Hold on one second. There we are. That's why. So I hope that you guys understand that. Please ask questions. I don't have a degree in astrophysics, but I have a science background and in biology and chemistry and astrophysics and stellar physics. And, I had a 4.0 grade point average in all my science classes. So that's not me trying to brag about anything. I'm just letting you know that I do have a cursory understanding of how these things work, and I'm open to learning more all the time. And that's why I listen to Suspicious Observers, because that channel is amazing. And Ben does an incredible job of explaining things for people who are not well versed with the language. Okay. That's not what I want. The reading. Okay, guys. So now we see right here that if I can ever possibly move these things. There we go. Come on. Okay. All right. There we go. Oh my gosh. You'd think that I could figure this out. Okay. All right, so we see right away, here's our death card again, right, as our causal factor. So come on, guys, let's be real about what this means, okay? That we have to accept. We have to accept that part of our metamorphosis process is that we are going to lose something. We have to make space for it. Pluto is really the agent of the death experience, but this is the Scorpio card. So just keep in mind, the moon comes into Scorpio tomorrow. Venus comes into Scorpio tomorrow. These are the feminine, receptive, our inner landscape, our feelings, our sensitivity, okay, to Scorpio. So we are about to go into this space in a feeling-based way. We're going to be sensitive to it. And if you go back to the readings, throughout this whole week so far, which is really just the last 2 days, we see that it's been setting us up. And so has all of this solar weather been setting us up, giving us information, giving us opportunities to purify ourselves, to come into contact with what this really represents. And we do need to take a break today and allow ourselves to just receive and to clear our minds and to relax and rest, okay? And I am also taking this advice, I assure you, because it's been very intense the last couple of days, okay? So do what you need to do to take care of yourself. But we see here that this is not going away, right? And I'm not suggesting that it's going to be literal death or a major experience of death or this big false flag. Who knows, right? I don't know. And I'm not here to tell you what's going to happen, but I'm not going to tell you that it's not going to happen. Things aren't going to be challenging either. And we all push against death. It's part of the ego's survival mechanism. So part of our ability to transcend and find a transcendent meaning is accepting this process and feeling this process and acknowledging and not turning away from it, okay? And accepting that it's part of life, right? That we have to let go of something, that something needs to be destroyed. Death is the precursor to rebirth. And to hold that in the face of our own fear about that. It's perfectly natural and normal to be afraid of a process that no person really knows what to expect, right? Because it's part of being in 3D, right? It's part of being in a material body and a physical body. And if we didn't have fear, we wouldn't know how to walk through it, okay? So again, just see that this is coming back around twice in a row here, that this Scorpio energy is going to be right here for us to acknowledge, and it'll be this causal factor. Now, what's interesting here, we have our Knight of Discs, right? The fire of the earth. There's actually a lot of earth energy in this reading. And this is because we really, again, need to root ourselves into reality here. How do we take this high vibrational information and energy that's coming in? How do we root down? Well, again, we connect to the actual earth herself. And she is like a mother guiding us through. Eventually will come and shield us when we are, past our ability to handle what's there, just like any parent would do, right? But you don't also smother your children and keep them from having experiences where they grow and shape their character as well. And that's part of this weakening magnetic field. Also because it's about to flip, right? There's that whole thing as well. So that's a different conversation. But what I will say here is that with this Knight of Discs in its reversal, we are, this energy is about being very industrious and being this is our Mars in Virgo, right? And he's getting to the end of Virgo here, and he's soon going to come into his detriment in Libra, right? And so he's going to start losing power, because Mars wants to go. Mars wants to be the warrior. Mars wants to act on its fire, right? Mars wants to actualize itself, move forward, do something. Mars in Libra is way more diplomatic, and it's like a soldier or a warrior going into retirement and having to be in this diplomacy position. So it's not an easy place. We lose a lot of our power of the divine masculine and the warrior energy when it comes into Libra. So even as it's finishing its transit of Virgo in the next couple of days, the next week, there can be a real difficulty here when it's reversed, because we get kind of self-centered and sullen, right? When the Knight of Discs is reversed, and intolerant, and unable to put any other interests ahead of our own, right? Unwilling to change. There's stagnation here when it's reversed as well, and grasping, and even stubbornness, right? And being jealous, and really having a difficult time relating to other people and their needs, because we want to be putting our energy of action behind what we are cultivating. So in its best, right, it's provider, and it's very industrious and reliable. But at his worst, he is kind of an asshole, right? And I'm not suggesting that we are feeling like an asshole right now. What I'm suggesting is that this death energy, right, of the larger picture of destruction, needing to be the precursor to rebirth, is really going to challenge us that wants to keep acting on and towards building something, right? We want to keep moving towards this aspect and really put our energy into providing and building and being industrious and creating, but we find ourselves in this moment kind of blocked in some ways from doing this, and it can come out in a lot of different types of ways here. Like I said, grasping for things. There's a lot of, it could be stagnation, unable to but change and be very stubborn. That's a part of it too, because Mars in its self is just like go, face and be brave and courageous and act. And when we find ourselves having to submit in some ways to a power that is beyond what our ego wants, right? Because Mars does really represent that ego drive. We can find ourselves being kind of like intolerant and really unable to see the big picture. It also does suggest that this will be the heart of this moment here is that we have to start letting go of that. The purification by fire comes through, but we don't stay in that place. Again, here comes the earth in her mitigation effect, where she the magnetic field increases and kind of buffers us in some ways from the onslaught of more and more of that fire. And so this is also showing that it's, this night within us that is putting all of its energy into building something, growing something, providing something, is starting to dissipate a little bit and to kind of come back into itself just a little bit. And you'll see that our effect, or what to expect here, is also a court card in the discs, but it's the Prince, right? Which is a completely different energy, a little bit more thoughtful, more inventive, more unwavering, and focused on movement as opposed to fire. So before we get there, we'll look here. Divine Physician. At the root here is our healing process. Now, we've talked about this many times, right? The Divine Physician. He's got the caduceus on the crest here. He's got the bucket that goes into the well, right? The well that has the water of our spirit, of our feeling, of emotion. And, he's beaming the light at her heart. She has to be open to receive. It goes both ways here. in order to receive the healing, she has to open her heart to it. So we do see here that now we're at this point where energetically and maybe even subconsciously, we don't even realize that what we're really experiencing here is a healing, and a healing experience that is energetic, that is divine, right? That is sacred, that is more than we even are aware of. Now, this could be also stepping into this role, but considering where it's situated here at the root where we draw our power from, this really suggests to me that we are collectively moving into a time where our subconscious, right, that dark space is being healed. There's healing available to that place, but you can't heal something that you don't acknowledge exists, right? And so that's the other aspect, is that we need to heal the programming and the trauma and all of these aspects that are in our subconscious if we want to shift our conscious awareness, okay? Now, there's a lot of court cards in this reading too, because we see that where we release our power is the King of Roses. This is balancing our passion and the purity, right? And the healing. Those yellow roses are healing and creativity. Those are aspects of our sacral chakra. Again, in the sacral chakra, in the seat of our real creative power, right? And where our immune system is in the gut, and in the waters of our pelvic area. That's where, it's our sacrum, right? Where it's the end of the spinal cord, right? The root of it. So we can release our power here by really being tender and thoughtful to ourselves, right? And to others, really tender and thoughtful to ourselves and others. Still passionate, right? You don't want to completely let yourself go. You want to stand up for yourself and take loving, but very considered action. Okay. And this is where that Knight of Discs here at the heart being reversed is really letting us know that it's okay in some ways to just kind of let go of the fire, right? The fire has already moved through. And now it's time to allow ourselves to heal, right? And, sometimes there's a lot of damage that happens when we get this influx of solar energy, but our bodies are completely capable of healing any kind of damage, and it's allowing that process to happen. And so if you found yourself really getting caught up in the fear aspect of what's coming and the density that's coming in, but also not wanting to turn away from it, but also not allow yourself to find that healing. Realize that it is the pressure that provides the counterbalance to the density that is definitely there. I mean, it's definitely there, and to not acknowledge that it's not balanced, okay? And so it's about standing up for yourself, thoughtful action, tender support, right? You can still be passionate and be in your masculine without fighting, right? Necessarily fighting against anything, getting caught up in the dualistic nature of us versus them, and see yourself as this person, regardless of what your gender expression or identity is, what your biological sex, it doesn't matter. These are archetypal symbols, right? We want to stand up for ourselves and be that masculine, but in a way that is much more thoughtful and tender and balancing these things out. This is the best way we can release our energy and to put our conscious awareness in terms of embodying this, okay? And realize that at the root here, where we draw our power, is this incredible healing potential right now. So, and this is where we are able to develop that ability to see a transcendent meaning, right? And this is where we can we can face our fear, as opposed to saying that there's no reason to be afraid. And yes, on a very basic level, there's no reason to be afraid at a spiritual soul level, but we're still living here on earth. And this is very clear that we are still subject to the same principles in our material reality as everything else. Oh man, I'm having serious deja vu right now. Okay, so our outcome here is the Prince of Discs, right? Now, again, thoughtful is the word here. The bull is the one pulling his chariot, right? So there's this Taurus type of energy. There's the earth, right? The physical nature, the material reality. He's got a globe. He's also completely nude, right? Except for a helmet, and his staff. And there's just all kinds of like circular symbols here. He's got like bubbles. Remember we talked about that yesterday with the bubbles when the moon in Libra met Mercury, and it's the children blowing bubbles. There's a fantasy element and a daydream element that's really important that we bring in, so that we don't get too serious, right? And get too caught up, but be able to daydream, right? It's not about our conscious awareness and that changing anything. It's about the choice of where we get to resonate, okay? Now, the Prince of Disc, thoughtful, inventive, stable, industrious, slow in following and developing, right, is very methodical, right, and very unwavering. You know, this is bringing us to a place where we can be so unwavering. We can be the hub in that turning wheel, because this is what we're ultimately going to need come October. And once he is on his path, you know, he goes for it, right? Just like a bull. Look at that bull. Like, that bull is going to pull the chariot where it needs to go. And there's very little that is going to deter that trajectory. So this individual can seem a little cold in their emotions. It really kind of brings up the Orion starseed nature a little bit. Is very patient and tolerant up to a point, just like a Taurus, right? Once you push the Taurus over the edge, it's over. They hardly forgive once that they have been enraged, right? It's over at that point. Just like the idea when the bull sees red, you know, and then it goes charging. It's the idea that you push this person to a certain point, they're going to act. But up until that time, it's very unwavering and steady, very practical, very reasonable, very careful, very reliable and enduring. This is the person we can expect ourselves to, to be based on these things. But it's not going to come without this causal factor of the death symbolism, right? Letting go of something in order for something new to grow. And that Knight of Wands is going to have a real hard time letting go. And it's important that we give ourselves some space and to allow this healing process. The purification has come through. It has released what has been buried in the subconscious and the unconscious. Now it's time to clean up and to heal. Now, when it comes to the guidance here, it's interesting that the scribe came up, because we do need to give our minds a break, right? The Mercury, where Mercury's at in Libra, is very connected to this idea of taking a siesta. We really do need to give ourselves kind of a mental break in processing. Now, something about the scribe is very directly connected to the divine physician, because number one, it's the 6 times 2, right? So 12. And it's the end of a cycle, 12 being the Pisces, 6 being the Virgo energy, right? The divine physician is actually bringing that Virgo energy into material form, devotion, discipleship, commitment to healing, right? Healing, the process of healing is very much a 6th house in Virgo energy. Health in and of itself is very much in that Taurus area, and our natural predisposition, genetics and whatnot. It's the 6th house and Virgo where the healing process is actually happening, because mutable earth does suggest that there is a shift or a change. There's malleability in the physical reality. So your body's immune system is moving and changing and doing its job. The 12 is coming back around to record everything that there is, right? So the scribe is often considered well-versed in all subjects, because the scribe is recording everything in a cultural context, right? All of it, art and literature and history and law and all of the religious texts, everything getting written down. And so there's a lot of information coming in, okay? A lot of information, and you don't have to process it all right now. Just let it come in. Let it come in and be imprinted in some ways, and give yourself the chance to just let it come in. There will be time to process this eventually, right? In a very methodical way. The Prince of Discs is very methodical, very rooted, very unwavering and reliable, and takes the appropriate steps and just keeps moving. But there's no rush here. There's no fire that's pushing this forward. So this is also suggesting there's a lot coming in. There's a lot coming in, and it's coming in for healing, right? It's coming in for healing at that subconscious level. So let it come in, right? And if it's dark, if it's troubling, especially in your dream state, in your, in your awareness, let it come in, and you don't have to attach to it just to let it move through you. This is a big part of where the nodal axis of the moon is right now. We have to let it move through us, right? And there's a reason these things are coming up, right? Take it as information and file it away instead of necessarily trying to push it away, right? The scribe isn't going to be like, I don't like that, it's too negative, so I'm not going to record it. Just recording something doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving it your power, okay? There's a lot coming in. And then the Kiwi came back again, right? Here's the Kiwi, taking that walking meditation, right? The movement of our, a movement-based meditation, right? Whatever it is that you can do that allows you to get back into your body and with intention, right? And movement and balancing the two sides of the brain. Walking is an amazing way to do this. All kinds of movement arts are an amazing way to do this. I mean, yoga and Tai Chi, Qigong, martial arts, like even just basic exercise of walking, running, jumping jacks, whatever. It's about doing it with intention and doing it as a form of meditation, okay? This is why this is just important. And so if you're having a hard time with the influx of information that's coming in, and you are having a hard time with the healing component that is going on for all of us at a deep level, purging it all out, do the walking meditation. I'm going to take this advice very directly after this transmission and go out to the woods and go walk and hike, because it's the best way, in my opinion, to to allow ourselves to connect into the mother, into the living soil. And that way we can actually have a clear head and a very clear path in front of us that we can utilize to bring things into physical reality, okay? The falcon here, when it comes to that King of Roses, this is interesting. It says, act on the opportunity that's before you and commit to it without equivocation, right? The falcon's eyesight is very sharp. The falcon is not going to overanalyze or think about its meal. It's just going to utilize its instinct, and it's going to act when it's time to act, and it's going to dive bomb and grab that meal. And that's really connected to where asteroid Ceres, who is the goddess of the grain and agriculture, represents the function of Gaia herself, is in 10 degrees Gemini, which is the nosedive of the airplane, right? Where you commit regardless of success or failure. You commit to this process. You go and do the dive bomb, going after what it is you need that sustains you. And when we're talking about emotions and the roses and feeling, here's our Sangha. Whoever our community is, I'll tell you what, I've really reached out and allowed my connection to my community to help with my process, because I'm right with you. I've been processing and pulling in a lot of this information and really feeling the density coming in, right? And acknowledging it and not turning away from it. But sometimes you need support, right? So you're connecting to a community of like-minded purpose and activity. Maybe it's important to be open to new connections at this point. If we want to step into this very passionate but pure, this tender and thoughtful, but also taking action on our own behalf. That King of Roses. I mean, this is a leader, right? The king is a leader. He is somebody that is able to take responsibility for himself and his emotions, right? We can find connection in our community, and we don't want to necessarily overthink it. We want to just go for it, whatever it is, right? And in this case, it's very much about healing and trusting our gut, trusting our gut, trusting our gut, trusting our innate, right? It's the only guidance system that you need. You know, at one point in time, and then we'll get into the astrology. At one point in time, I was definitely being groomed to go down a much darker path. And it's not going to come out and tell you that it's a darker path. It appeases to your ego, tells you how special you are, right? How powerful you are. You're special because you're a light worker. You're special because you're a starseed. Let's get you up to speed with your special abilities. And you know, I was like this close to disappearing into that, like for real, this close. And, you know, all of these guides came out and all of these entities came out and they were talking to me and coming to me and all of this stuff. And like, you know, you buy into it because they're not going to just come out and be like, hey, by the way, we're archons and we are, you know, the shadow part of you. It appeases your ego, right? And one thing I've noticed is that, especially since the walk-in experience, but even before, you know, even before that happened, and I thankfully had my actual guidance system was just like, hey, you know, this is not where you want to go. You know, all of those supposed guides and entities and, you know, all of these different, characterizations, you know, that look like light beings, you know, you just pop them like a balloon and they deflated and went away, right? And now it's I don't get as much contact in that way as I used to, because now that I've had especially since my walk-in experience, it's just all there within me, right? I don't need my guides to talk to me all the time. I don't need that, right? I personally, not everybody is like that. And it's not to say that they're not around. I just don't need it because it's already in my innate. So it's really important to just trust yourself and trust trust yourself, trust your innate. That's the best barometer and the best, you know, navigation tool you can have. So let's look at this chart and then we'll be done. Okay, guys, thank you for sticking with this. This is a lot of information and I know it's been very intense lately. I have no illusions about that, and we've all been going through it in our own way, and it's important that we acknowledge this with each other, that we support each other, that we don't that we don't try to shame each other into you know, following a certain protocol or a certain mindset just because, you know, somebody else thinks that if, you know, we acknowledge these parts of ourselves that we're just creating a bad situation for ourselves. Like I said, I'm not going to backpedal from my original stance. By the time it's in your conscious mind, it is way embedded in your subconscious mind. So if you really want to change that focus, you have to get into the nitty gritty under the surface. And Virgo new moon was the perfect point of intention for that, is to receive and to listen, right? Listen to your innate, listen to your own gut. You know, if it feels off, it's because it is, okay? It's not because you are creating that reality for yourself and there's something wrong with you. There is a lot of programming that leads us to these places, and sometimes it looks like it's light and it's not, okay? And I learned that the hard way, the very hard way. And that's, you know, I'm glad that I did. I have gratitude for those experiences, as painful as they are, as embarrassing as they are. As, you know, there's a real tendency to feel shame about those types of things, but I don't. I feel gratitude for them because it put me in a position now where I can help other people be able to navigate those situations for themselves, and we can get on with this process and you know, creating a better world for everybody. Okay, So here is our astrology for today. And what first thing I want to point out straight out the gate is that, as you see here, our moon in Libra is in a quincunx. It's in a quincunx with Uranus. This is the degree of the new moon in October, okay? That means that the new moon in October will be quincunx, or 150-degree angle with Uranus, okay? This is going to be that point of test in some ways. Can you be the hub of the wheel? Can you find your transpersonal peace while the path is going around in a rhythm, right? Just like the toroidal field that comes through us is a cycle. Are we going to be able to hold our stillness in the midst of that cycle while Uranus is doing what Uranus does best, which is completely disrupt whatever part of the chart it's in and part of our life that it's impacting, and especially within us, right? The retrograde, it became very personal. It became very personal for people, and a lot of internal and a lot of personal readjustment happened with that last full moon and with Uranus stationing retrograde right before it. So the quincunx is our opportunity for transmutation, right? These two things don't fit together. It's trying to put the square peg in the round hole or vice versa. And the alchemical transmutation is about squaring the circle being our infinite selves, the square being the material reality. This is what transmutation allows for us. How do we find perfection in these things that don't fit? This is what a quincunx gives us the chance to do. So this happened right last night into the first thing this morning, right? This quincunx. So again, how were your dreams, especially with the moon, right? How were your dreams? How are you feeling? What came up for you within your own emotional landscape that allowed for you an opportunity to adjust yourself? Because Uranus is testing our character every step of the way in its position right now in Taurus, okay? So what was it? Where did you feel the stillness within you, okay? And like I said, the new moon will also be quincunx with Uranus. So this is a moment here where it's just a very subtle subconscious experience. When the sun comes along on the 6th of October and is in conjunction with the moon at this point, it's going to be activating it, right? Setting the intention for us to be able to find that transpersonal peace in the rhythm of the cycle, right? Because that's really what Libra allows for us, is transfiguration and reconstruction, because we are always adjusting ourselves to find balance. And when we've mastered that on some level, it's just a cycle. It's a wheel turning. It's a circular path like a labyrinth. And we are the hub. So right away, this was this little subtle but very potent opportunity for that to be the case. Okay. Now, we also find quincunxes with Pallas Athena and Neptune as well between Libra and Pisces. And I will show that to you here. So here's the quincunx. You don't see Pallas Athena on this chart, but it's at 18 to 19 degrees Pisces in its retrograde. So again, as we are feeling within us this constant oscillation that Libra really represents in terms of relationship, the perfect form of relationship. And it's always about moving around and being sensitive to where things need to be in order to give ourselves in perfect harmony and union in relationship. Again, the quincunx with Neptune, especially Neptune and Pisces, that's just like everything. There is no material reality in which to anchor or hold on to, right? It's just consciousness. It's just the infinite ocean of potential in Pisces, and Neptune is dissolving everything it touches in order to bring it back down there. So again, while we are connected to this infinite ocean of potential through our own emotional landscape, through our subconscious, which the moon represents, we also are attempting to balance something very material within us in the face of something that seems completely intangible, right? And again, with the scribe being involved in today's reading at a subconscious level, just allow it to come in, take it in. And, you know, this particular degree is about, we want to help. we want to help those who apparently are thirsty for it, right? We are a young, it's like a child giving birds a drink of water, right? It's just like, I really just very simply want to be able to provide this for those who are thirsty for it. And we want to. The problem is that everybody's turning into water. Everything turns into water with Neptune in Pisces. And so there's no way to really distinguish between us and other people and not having water and having water. So again, transmutation. How do we allow ourselves, how do we feel our way through wanting to provide or give to others so that they get their needs met, when in fact there's nothing to grab onto at this point. This is a really difficult position to be in. And I think that people are really struggling with this, especially if you have strong Libra in your chart. And you are a person that really gravitates towards transfiguring yourself in order to make sure that everybody's needs are met. When in fact there is no anything to transfigure with Neptune and Pisces. It's going back to source, and everything goes back to source, right? And so again, this is kind of an interesting dynamic here that we're working with. So another opportunity for transmutation. Now, this is where the essence of this transmission really comes into effect, because asteroid Vesta is in 24 to 25 degrees Libra, right? So that means that she is going to square Pluto, right? Here comes Pluto. The moon will square Pluto at the same time. So the moon squares Pluto. Vesta is in a square to Pluto, then the moon comes into conjunction with Vesta at the same time, right? You start to see these connections here. And at the very same time, Jupiter comes into the picture as well. Is in a trine to the moon. Let's just bring the moon up to this point. There we go, right? So the moon is in square to Pluto. The moon is in trine to Jupiter. It's conjunct with Vesta, which is not on this chart, but is right here as well. And so Vesta, asteroid Vesta, the flame within, the spiritual spark of our divinity within that sustains us, sustains the larger community. And especially in Libra, it really is about the spark that sustains the balance of the community or the family or the collective or the relationship, okay? The moon reaching this point, square to Pluto, but trine to Jupiter. This is about transmutation of our emotional energies in the face of Pluto tearing down everything that we have relied upon to give us form and structure, and a sense of institutionalized power, right? That's Capricorn, institutionalized power. Based on culture and society and philosophy and religion. All of these things come together to create actual structures that we rely upon and the traditions that we rely upon. Pluto is pulling them away thread by thread within us, right? So the moon is reaching this point. And what is this point? It's actually very much directed, connected to the imagery for today, which is the site. I'm just going to read the Sabian symbol for 25 degrees Libra. Remember, we round up. The sight of an autumn leaf brings to a pilgrim, right? A pilgrim, a seeker, the sudden revelation of the mystery of life and death. It's the ability to discover in every experience of transcendent or cosmic meaning. I mean, that's pretty much the essence of today's transmission, that we have to be able to acquire this ability to discover this, right? To allow it to come in. And again, the scribe keeps coming back around for me in terms of its guidance at a subconscious level, because this is about discovery, right? The scribe records everything and then becomes very educated as a result of all of this discovery, as a result of recording everything, right? And so this ability to discover in every experience a transcendent or cosmic meaning is coming right to the feeling-based experience for all of us is connecting to Vesta, which in fact is showing us that this is the spark that is going to sustain us to see everything that's happening, even at the most dark and the most dense, as a cosmic or transcendent experience. Just like the autumn leaf, it's beautiful and you realize that it's dying, right? And it's part of the larger cycle. And then the square to Pluto, right? The square and the friction created is that Pluto is a very raw and potent and powerful direct experience of this, right? This is how we actually transform, because we feel the destruction within us. And so it's one thing to conceptualize it in your mind. It's quite another to feel it. And this square today is going to be very challenging, but it's setting us up to grow from what is coming in, which is an incredible amount of density, okay? And this is where it's not that there's no fear, it's that you transmute your fear, right? You transmute your fear and the intensity of going into this place, right? You know, at that point, they can bombard you with all kinds of imagery and messages and darkness, and you take it and you're like, transmute it, transmute it, transmute it, right? You don't turn away from it and pretend it doesn't exist. You look right at it and you're like, I'm going to eat you for breakfast. Like, thank you for all of this energy. Thank you very much. That queen of forces from yesterday, that's exactly what she's doing. She's just like, oh yeah, oh great, that's power. I'll take that. Thank you. Transmute it into awareness, into transcendence, into cosmic meaning, right? And in a trine to Jupiter, which is expanding within us this space in which to discover our humanity and our future and where we're going. This is about, again, transmutation of our emotional energies. We're taking the emotional energies and transmuting it. Remember, Aquarius is the water bearer, right? It is the container that holds the water. It is the larger geometric pattern that then holds the energy that vibrates within it, right? Just like geometry and numerology, it all has a resonance, right? And it's the connection. It's all of the we are each like a little node with the connection of all of these lines that allows for the energy to pass through, right? The energy of higher awareness and consciousness. So it's in trine, right? It's supporting it. It's foundational. It's going to give us the resources and the advocacy that Jupiter represents to transmute these emotional energies. It's not going to be easy, right? The fact that the death card is coming up 2 days in a row as our causal factor is a really clear indication that there is something descending, right? So we get to decide whether or not we are going to, of course, we could certainly let it consume us and be in fear. Absolutely. That's a choice, right? You could also bypass it entirely and say, I'm not going to think about that stuff. And that's a choice. Or you can be a total badass, right? And transmute that energy by like taking both sides of it and creating something new entirely. And the moon in Libra at the very end here, is going to really provide this opportunity, this connection with Vesta and Jupiter and Pluto, and the moon, right? And then by late tonight into tomorrow morning, the moon is going to meet Venus at the very last degrees. This is very important. Venus at the last degree of Libra. This is mastery level of Libra. And then they both move in to Scorpio tomorrow, okay? The moon first, and then by the end of the day, Venus will move into Scorpio. So the moon in Scorpio, that's that 0 to 1st degree of Scorpio is the tour bus to hell, right? We're all in this together and we're all going to hell together. So as the moon moves through Scorpio, this is going to be an interesting next couple of days. That's for sure. And so I would recommend that you realize how badass you really are and that you can you don't have to take in the density. You can use it as a force of resistance in some ways to allow, the pressure to push back out. Boy, that makes your field stronger. So much stronger, right? And there are things that you can do, right? Sound healing. Like I said, the movement meditations, I think that's a big one. I think that that's a really big one. Get into your body. All right, move it around, because that's where you're going to feel your gut instinct is in your body, not your mind, you know? And if you haven't listened already, I really highly recommend you listen to what I posted from David Foster Wallace, because he really laid it out in such an amazingly understandable and palpable way in terms of the choice that we get to have in terms of where we focus our energy, right? Again, it's not to say that I'm not suggesting that we should allow it to consume us, right? And some people are doing that. And the other side of that is to not acknowledge that. And it's impossible for me I wouldn't say impossible, but it's very difficult for me with this stack up in my 8th house right now. The sun and Mars and Mercury, and right now the moon and Vesta all in my 8th house. Like, I am going into those spaces and I'm not afraid of them. And that's where my natal Pluto is in my 8th house, right? And so that's where, in an evolutionary astrology context, you're going to make the most impact on the collective, on your community, on your society, is where you find your natal Pluto. So, because that is your soul's default setting of if it's transformation. So this is not new territory for me, which is why I won't turn away from it. I will call it out for what it is, but I'm also going to be that badass queen of forces and be like, yep, I got both of them right here and I'm going to put them together. Thank you very much. You just gave me more power density that's trying to encroach on my reality. So, my friends, wow, that was incredible. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to check in with the chat real quick, see what's going on, and see if it's still going. That's great. And thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you. I love you. I truly mean that. If you are interested in a reading or any kind of energy work to support your process, I am still working remotely with people. Reiki is such an amazing, amazing tool for this time right now, because it is the highest light coming through. And I've been a practitioner for going on 16 years. It'll be 16 years in December since my very first attunement. And I worked with multiple clients every single day in the context of being a body worker. So, just to give you my credentials here, because it is, there's not a lot that really, you don't get state licensed to practice Reiki. There's not a ton of oversight. So people they get their online attunement and then they start working with people's energy fields without any experience. And so I understand and I value people's skepticism around this topic. I'm just letting you know my credentials and how long I've been doing it and how many people I've worked with. And that if there's one thing I know I'm a master of, it's definitely this Reiki work. So I'm happy to provide any assistance or energy healing I can in this process. I did a session yesterday with someone, and that in itself was, I get the session too because I'm channeling the Reiki. I am not using my energy to change or manipulate anything in you energetically. We are receiving it together, and I am just an antenna in that way. So, but what I did find is that it really did help shift some things around. So, and it is beyond time and space. So distance work is just as potent as it is in person. And I can say that with confidence, having done it for so long and getting my feedback and knowing what it feels like and what to expect. So reach out if you're interested in a session. You don't even have to be available at the time that I'm giving. You will still receive it. You will still receive the Reiki energy in your field, and it will have an impact. And usually I get a lot of really good intuitive information as well. That's kind of like a bonus, right? About where areas in your body that need more energetic support. Perhaps you have a particular thing you need to be working on in a certain area energetically, and so that comes up too. Anyway, guys, take care of yourselves. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow for the astrology report for the week, and enjoy the day. Do what you need to do to get into your body, allow that healing to come in, and trust yourself and your innate. It's your best tool. It really is. Love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.